Many know about slavery, but few discuss paper genocide. We did not all come from Africa, and most of us have Aboriginal roots that were stripped away due to reclassification and miseducation. As a native Black American and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, I understand the importance of tracing your lineage. If you want to learn how to trace your genealogy and apply for tribal citizenship, go to nativeblackancestry.com to schedule a consultation.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British, man. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them, and this shit get way deeper than your pigment.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, smash the like button on the way in. Subscribe if you've yet to do so. As always, you got to check out the website nativeblackancestry.com. I've jam-packed it with tons of historical resources for those that need assistance with their genealogy journey. Tonight is going to be an interesting broadcast, guys. Tonight is going to be very, very interesting. You see, we're going to be stepping into a part of history that almost nobody talks about, because the moment that you understand it, the whole colonial narrative collapses. You see, tonight we're going to go to Florida. Not the Florida that you know today with the theme parks and the retirees, but an older Florida. A Florida covered in indigenous hammocks, ancestral orange groves, and thriving native Black communities that were mapped, surveyed, and then stolen. Let's talk about it, y'all. And we're going to actually walk you through exactly how this happened from A to Z, because here's the real truth. Florida's orange industry, one of the biggest agricultural empires in the United States, didn't come from Europeans. It came from us, from indigenous Black communities who planted, nurtured, and maintained groves for centuries before white settlement intensified. But once those groves were mature, profitable, and mapped, well, you know what comes next. The same government that surveyed them seized them. And then they wrote us out of the story. So before we dive deeper, you need to understand this term, a hammock. A hammock, I'm not talking about the hammock that you lay in. I'm talking about an indigenous ecological engineering achievement. It wasn't just a forest, it was a cluster of trees that strategically maintained a habitat, elevated fertile land surrounded by wetlands. And our ancestors chose them intentionally. Higher ground, richer soil, natural protection, easy access to water. You see, these hammocks were micro villages, gardens, medicine grounds, and food forests combined. And when the Spanish first arrived in the 1500s and the 1600s, they were stunned to find native Black Floridians had already domesticated citrus, corn, squash, beans, and medicine plants in these spaces. These weren't random groves. These were our agricultural inheritance. Early colonial records, Spanish, British, and American, all mention the same thing. Thousands of orange trees growing deep in the interior, tended by native people. Now, let me be clear. This was before commercial settlement, before plantations, before the so-called pioneers. These orange groves weren't wild. They were curated, engineered, maintained, protected. Indigenous communities, many of whom would later be reclassified as Negro, mulatto, colored, or Seminole, passed these groves down generationally. But once the U.S. government realized the agricultural value of this land, well, they did what they always do. They surveyed, they documented, they seized, they erased. And here's the part that most people never hear. The government literally sent surveyors into these hammocks to map them out. The healthiest groves, the most productive citrus clusters, the water sources, the trails, the villages nearby. And then they took that data and used it to divide the land into parcels. But they didn't parcel it for us, the people who had lived there for centuries. Oh, no. They parceled it for, can you guess it? Speculators, railroad corporations, plantation families, military officers, politically connected settlers. And they wrote the indigenous caretakers of those groves down as Negro laborers, not landowners, not native people, not sovereign communities. And once you're labeled Negro in the 1800s, come on, your land rights go to zero, zilch, nada. Your inheritance disappears, your identity evaporates on paper. We call that paper genocide, ladies and gentlemen. And that is exactly what happened here. Now, this isn't just about oranges. This is about a pattern. The same pattern that hit our families, our names, our tribal status, our land allotments, our freedmen ancestors, our leaders like Silas Jefferson and my own grandfather, Thomas Jefferson Adams Harjo. You see, the pattern is simple. When the government wants indigenous land, the first step is to reclassify its indigenous people. Because if you're native, you have rights. But if they reclassify you as Negro, well, suddenly you have none. You see, the orange groves of Florida are one of the clearest examples of this tactic. Tonight, we're going to break this down piece by piece. Now, the hammock maps, the early orange grove surveys, the colonial journals that admitted that these groves were indigenous, and how all of this ties into the broader story of paper genocide and racial reclassification. And my co-host tonight is going to take the lead on most of this. He's got a powerful presentation prepared. I'll jump in with questions, context, and commentary as we go. But settle in, guys. Settle in. This is a family affair. Because tonight we're not just exposing stolen fruit trees. We're exposing a whole hidden economy built on Native Black agriculture, Native Black land management, and Native Black civilization that was repackaged as pioneer innovation. And without further ado, let's bring up the man of the hour, Handsome History. How you doing, brother? How you doing?
Hey, good to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me again. This is great.
Oh yeah, after our first collaboration, the people were desperately awaiting your return.
Yeah, okay.
If only you knew how many comments and emails I got.
That's awesome.
Yep. Well, go ahead. For those who aren't privy to you and your content, give them a brief introduction into what platforms they can find you on, what kind of history you dive into, and what we'll be discussing here tonight.
Sure. So the website's American Ancestry Decoded, and the focus is on American history, but in particular, melanated Black American Indian history. Because as I got into this area of American history a couple of years ago, it just became obvious that like every topic I got into, every leaf I overturned, it was always like the same scenario, like this new civilization unrolling or rolling back an existing civilization. So I just kind of feel like, well, this is what it's really all about. So this is where I'm going to focus. And so that's what the website is, and there'll be a library, a lot of reports, dossiers, and just a lot of the investigations that I do, field reports as well that I'm getting into, where you learn how to spot mound complexes or how something might have been previously, set of canals or whatever, start to really spot things. So that's what I'm up to. So.
Nice. Sounds good. And if I understand correctly, just like how on my website, nativeblackancestry.com, as a thank you for people visiting the site, they can download a free ebook from me, Reclassified, The Hidden History of Black Indians in the Southeast from Indian to Negro. In that same vein, it's my understanding that if people go to your website, what is it again? American Ancestry Decoded, right?
Yes, sir. American Ancestry Decoded, and they're the free investigation. It's a full 20-pager on the indigenous internet of agriculture. So sort of nice expansion of what I'll talk a little bit about here tonight.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested in getting a full detailed report on some of the work that he does, doing these deep dives, make sure to go to AmericanAncestryDecoded.com. Just put your email in and click Access Report, and you can get it downloaded automatically. I already did it a couple days ago, and it's a wealth of knowledge. But let's jump straight on into it. I know when it comes to early stages of colonialism, you were the first one that kind of hipped me to the situation where some of the land surveyors, some of the people working on behalf of the settlers were actually hostaged or converted indigenous people from centuries prior. Is that right?
Right, right. So one thing that really becomes overwhelming is the degree of the hostaging system that would particularly apply to the elites. And it was a true, putting them through, the first Harvard school, William and Mary. Basically, all your universities are originally taking these children and putting them into the program, so to speak, and they then come out at age 21, believe it or not, with the rights of Englishmen as long as they're in the Americas. So that sets up this whole thing of how many so-called Englishmen are we reading about, or so-called Americans are we reading about that were actually Indians, that had been through this system. You'll never look at a surveyor, Indian Bureau agent, missionary, all those positions that required knowing the language, knowing the protocol, knowing, understanding, respect, everything like that. Who's the likely, candidates to be, the most talented in that area, right? You're gonna,
Yeah.
and just so you know, it's just a part of how they did the same thing in other parts of the world when they were colonizing. So it's not just something they did here in America. This is the same way they behave towards the elite of children, like in India and other parts.
Okay, so this is a colonial playbook that they orchestrate across the globe. It's not unique to the Americas. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like this might be the reason why, even though the founding fathers descend from the British Empire, I think this may be why they still to this day give reverence to an individual like Christopher Columbus, because the Spanish actually kind of laid out the original blueprint, right? I mean, it was the Spaniards such as Columbus or De Soto who would come into these indigenous villages, hostage an Indian woman or a young boy, force them to be an interpreter and guide them through the land so that they can continue their campaigns of conquest.
Well, literally, that's the playbook, right? Whether the Catholic or Protestant, and as I believe, they're actually, just the latest version of the knightly orders. So that's how far back this technique and how expert these people were that were coming in to do what they did, like, with a small group of people. So they knew what they were doing, is my point. And yeah, it actually feeds in that Columbus talks about it, and then. Yeah, do you think it doesn't matter Columbus? Well, they named, the mascot is the goddess Columbia, Lady Columbia, Columbus. Columbus means dove. So they were, literally telling people this is the Christ, the dove, coming here to do this. So a lot going on there.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of rumors and speculation that certain factions, such as the Knights Templar, may have even made their way over to the Americas before Columbus. So, a lot of people start colonization with 1492, but I don't know if you found this in your research, but I've seen a lot of things to suggest that Europeans were actually coming over here prior to 1492.
Sure. I mean, it certainly feels on the East Coast. You have, there's all these dead, Indian villages. Oh, okay, well, who came here before? It's kind of interesting, right? Like, but then the actually on the West Coast, it's the metals, it's the silver, and the connection to China, where I really feel certainly there was things going on that account for the explosive use of silver all of a sudden in the economies of China through the Middle East to Europe. They did not actually have remotely enough silver in that area of the world to have the money supply that they had. So the math requires you to ask, like, well, where else did they get the silver from? Yeah, that gets interesting. So that puts me to having people here like in the 1100s easily, but just happens to match up with the recession of the Maya, right? They just sort of disappeared, right? Yeah. Everybody's always disappearing in the narrative, but it's intriguing that is when, the official narrative says they sort of, go away. And it seems to be when I'm thinking that the Khans and the Asians are showing up and they're getting that silver.
Interesting. Very interesting. Especially when you talk about something like the Khan dynasty. I mean, they went so far and so wide, but nobody really ever, at least mainstream historians don't really ever investigate or look into whether they could have came over to the Americas, or at least remote parts of the Americas. Yet we do have such an Asiatic influence in certain parts of the Americas. And we're supposed to believe that it all comes from this ancient Bering Strait migration, but
right. I mean, right.
hey, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, as far as the orange groves, as far as the surveying, I know that you have a bit of a presentation to prepare on that subject. So I'll go ahead and give you the floor to jump on into it.
All right, thank you. So, guys, this will just be what I call like a investigative report, like in a narrative format. So there's a lot of research behind it. So here's the title: What Your Ancestors Built: The Indigenous Internet of Agriculture. So today we're going to talk about a civilization in the Southeast that most Americans have never heard of, even though millions have descended from it. It's a civilization that engineered water, soil, citrus, fish, wildlife, medicine, and aromatherapy into a unified network. It's like a real-world operating system. The civilization that European corporations couldn't copy, couldn't manage, and ultimately had to bulldoze so they could install their own system, a dry land, fenced, taxable, mortgageable grid. What the ancients had was what I call the Indigenous Internet of Agriculture, or the American mound water architecture. And this didn't just feed people. This created wealth, health, pleasure, transportation, and freedom. And then it was taken. Section 1, the man who saw the remnants. William Bartram, royal botanist, traveler, and corporate insider. In the 1770s, King George III sent a young botanist, William Bartram, into the interior of the Southeast. He goes into Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida. His mission: inventory the natural wealth, build a balance sheet of America, evaluate the assets before the crown takes them. But Bartram wasn't just some naive Englishman. His appearance, his comfort with tribal leaders, and the respect he received in council meetings with chiefs all point to something deeper. He was almost certainly a descendant of an indigenous hostage line. A kid sent north, trained in British schools, fluent in English protocol, then redeployed in America as a guide, translator, and observer. What made him different is this guy recognized what he was seeing. He saw the wreckage of a great agricultural web, and he actually mourned it. One of his most famous lines captures it. He says, "Scenes change from magnificence to ruins, and I have been affected with extreme regret at beholding the destruction." Bartram wasn't describing uncivilized wilderness. He was documenting the tail end of a sophisticated economy. 1760s. Section 2, the economic genius of a hammock. Actually a hummock, but renamed hammock in English. A single hammock was worth more than any colonial farm. And let's talk dollars and yield. A hammock, one of these biodiverse, shaded islands of abundance, produced more value per acre than any European-style field could dream of. Here's a breakdown of how the Indians packed value to one hammock. Food value: oranges, grapes, figs, pawpaw, persimmon, palmetto berries. Then you get game animals that actually come there, get fattened on fruits and nuts. Like, oh, here's the deer, here's the turkey. Just grab and go. Bartram described one hammock this way: the ground is strewed with oranges. Bears and deer are feeding here in great numbers. Medicinal value: every Florida hammock was a pharmacy. Yopon holly, which is caffeine, sassafras, spicebush, willow, elderberry, magnolia bark, and dozens more. Colonial doctors wrote about indigenous medicinal gardens. They just didn't understand these were designed ecosystems, not accidents of nature. Aromatherapy value: oranges, magnolia, bay, and grapevines created natural mood regulators. Travelers wrote that hammocks revived their spirits. Bartram said entering them was like walking into a perfumed temple. Cooling and hydrological value: the canopy itself trapped cool air like a refrigerator. Roots filtered the water. Shade reduces evaporation by up to 60%. This is why the wildlife clustered around them. This is why the travelers rested in them. This is why entire trade routes depended on them and connected them. And you have the social value. They also function like rest stops. In the book, he's always resting. It sounds like the guy is glamping. Meeting houses, he meets with the chiefs, picnic grounds, medicinal clinics, ritual spaces, and just waypoints in the traveling trade economy. And Europe had nothing like this. So this wasn't wilderness. This was infrastructure. Section 3, the orange economy, the lost fragrance. Get this, America didn't get oranges from Spain. The Spaniards got them from America. Bartram found oranges everywhere in the Southeast, along riverbanks, deep inside the hammocks, on shell mounds in the middle of lakes, on islands, in wild groves, miles from any plantation. And here's the thing, he never once describes European settlers planting them. He always finds the groves already there. At Lake George in Florida, he says, I saw a nearly circular island, which was almost an entire orange grove, and the air was perfumed. Oranges were a keystone crop of this indigenous system. When Florida boosters in the 1800s advertised the orange blossom scent, they were literally selling the last breath of this older civilization. That scent doesn't exist on oranges in the Iberian Peninsula. By the mid-1900s, after monoculture, overclearing, draining, pesticides, frost die-offs, the orange blossom scent that defined early Florida had already vanished. You can track the collapse in the railroad tourist ads, the orange blossom special. Section 4, the hydrological web. The water roads were older than anything that Europe built. It wasn't built on roads here. Everything was based on water. Imagine this network in Florida, these rivers, the Suwannee, Santa Fe, St. John, Alabaha, Withlacoochee, Ocklawaha, Okefenokee Feeder, Everglades sheet flow. All this connected literally through underground limestone springs and engineered cuts. That's right, you heard me right, engineered cuts. Bartram described this, broad avenues open to the lakes whose glittering surfaces reflected the groves of palm and magnolias. So they had all these waterways connected by what? Broad avenues. These weren't just paths. They were highways of trade, engineered to carry the sturgeon, the mullet, the medicine, the fruit, the pottery, the canoe caravans. Europe didn't improve this system. They destroyed it. Let's talk the sturgeons. This was a fish that was pure wealth. Bartram described sturgeons in the St. Johns and the Suwannee rivers so plentiful they slapped the sides of the boats. One colonial officer wrote, the river seems alive with them. A single sturgeon produced caviar, smoked fish, oil, glue, fertilizer, and even tools, yes, using the bones. Indigenous fisheries had been harvesting them sustainably for centuries. Europe wiped them out in decades. Sturgeon were one of the central economic systems of this civilization, and it collapsed under industrial extraction. How about the value of just one river? Let's run some numbers. Let's take the Suwannee River around 1500. Let's assume there was 40 hammock nodes, thousands of orange trees, millions of fish, the sturgeon runs, the attracting deer, bear, and turkey, the hundreds of medicinal species from the hammocks, the canoe shipping routes that we're going to use on the rivers and the tributaries, mounded islands along the way for storage and ceremony. Annual yield, 500 million to 1.7 billion per year off of just the Suwannee River alone. Now multiply that by all the other rivers around Florida. Now you see why the colonists couldn't resist. This wasn't a wilderness. This was a gold mine made of water and knowledge. How empire destroyed this. To seize this land, they had to destroy the system that made the land productive. Water was not taxable. Hammocks were not griddable. Mounds were not mortgageable. Oranges growing wild did not belong to anyone. So colonial corporations, British and American, did the only thing they could do. They drained it. They cleared it. They burned it. They fenced it. They plowed it. And they passed laws, improved the land with 2 years or forfeit your title, drain the wetlands before sale, fence the property to establish possession. This wasn't agriculture, it was asset conversion. A commons destroyed so it could be turned into collateral for private banks. Prohibition, this might surprise you, it is related. Why were the moonshiners and who were they? Why were they attacked? Because moonshine wasn't just a drink, it was a currency. And indigenous descended families in Alabama, Georgia, North Florida, and Indiana used it as payment, trade goods, savings, medicine, and credit. It threatened corporate alcohol syndicates and tax offices alike. So it became an economic assault. Consider this, Clay County, Alabama got rated at 27 times the amount that New York City did. Little old Clay County, Alabama. I wonder why. Indiana. Every time, whether it was draining the swamps or prohibition, they're going after this network based on water and producing amazing amount of value, including oranges, which is controversial because for some reason the conventional history says oranges didn't arrive until the Spaniards. So why does this matter? I think it's important to point out that there was a real civilization and it wasn't the one that you see on TV. There's actually this abundant civilization, and that just comes from the writings of agents, of people working for these kings or for these corporations. They have no reason to exaggerate, is my point. And it shows that they had an abundant agricultural civilization that knew how to use water and horses. And so what he saw was basically the remnants, and he even mourns about it. But even in the remnants, it sounds pretty amazing. So today, the descendants of those builders, anybody listening to this, we have to restore the memory of what was taken. What was going on? It was a continent-sized, water-based civilization that was built on balance, beauty, and shared prosperity. I don't think it's mythology. I don't even think I'm speculating. It's not even alternative history. It's your inheritance, and it's what really went down. Perhaps it's time to reclaim it.
That was perfect. Snaps on that one, okay? I'm gonna act like we in a 90s Def Jam poetry lounge or something. Right? We need some snaps on that. But hey, before we deconstruct everything that you just presented, and of course open up the floor to some questions from the audience, let's segue to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back, guys, in just a moment.
All right, how y'all doing? My name's Major Wright. I just got done with my consultation with Mike. If you trying to trace your ancestry, Mike is a good first step to go through. He's going to break it down to you, all 3 steps to get you what you need. And if you want somebody to maybe do the research for you, you pay that price and Mike can help you too. But yes, he will fill you up with knowledge that you never knew and give you all the things like those unanswered questions in your head throughout time. Talk to Mike, man. He's a great dude. I believe in Mike.
Hi, my name is Frances Tuck, and I contacted Mike from Mike TV on YouTube because I wanted to find out about my family's Native American history that I believed existed. Through the research that I was able to do through Mike TV, I was able to find out that our name is indeed on the registry. I had a consultation with Mike today, and because of his advice and the research that he has done, I am now confident that I'm able to find my family's roots in the Native American History database. Thank you, Mike.
Let's talk about it. Real people, real results. What are you waiting for? Make sure to check out nativeblackancestry.com if you need assistance with genealogy research. And if you would like to get an in-depth report of some of the history that Handsome History teaches, then you go over to his website as well, AmericanAncestryDecoded.com. and you can download a free report. But let's go ahead and break this down. You went over quite a bit. I was taking some notes because there were some things that really stood out in your presentation. The first thing I really want to touch on is when you're describing how they are, how they're in this, what a European would think is a hellscape, right? Marshy, swampy, alligators, no grids, no traditional cobblestone European roads, right? To them, this is like a crazy, nefarious type of environment. But then a surveyor who had to have some kind of indigenous connection to maneuver the land, how you said Bartram did. I mean, I believe in some of the content I viewed of yours. I'm not sure if it was Bartran or someone else, but you mentioned them even knowing like indigenous hand signals and how to communicate with local chiefdoms and things of that sort, right?
Yes, that was Bartram, and even in his book, he's in Tallahassee meeting a whole set of chiefs. And by the way, he has chiefs that escort him sometimes. So it just shows you these guys are all on the system. You know, they're on the white guy, white man system. He even talks like that. It's kind of interesting. He's calling like in these calls, start to realize like how much it's a legal label, like which side you're on really from the economic point. Really, they're not necessarily Christian, but they're playing ball. They're doing it by the European capitalist way. So he has a situation, and sure enough, they sit down with this other chief, and the chief's just like, welcome. I recognize you. Like you're one of us. You're what? It's like, dude, there it is. So in a lot of these books, guys, they will try and reveal, I think, a lot of times, perhaps who they really are. But they got to get it by censors. You know what I mean? Everything we're reading is heavily censored and edited. So you got to learn how to read between the lines a bit.
If anybody just Googles Bartram, it's probably going to make it seem like this is a white man.
Yeah,
but
he's from Philadelphia.
Settler, English settlers. But when you know about the hostaging and the converting that was going on centuries prior, when you see the signs and the signals how he's maneuvering through this territory, you understand his connection to the land. And furthermore, I think it takes someone like Bartram to even discover these oases, these hammocks, right? Because in your content, I've learned that it wasn't like you go to Florida and you just see, oh my gosh, orange groves, this is crazy, this is beautiful, this is amazing. No, it's like these are kind of hidden deeper in the interior of the swamplands, right? You have to go through some thick, crazy land, and then it opens up to a clearing, and all of a sudden you see groves, right?
Yeah. I mean, totally. And to your point earlier, like, the European model is, you don't live in the lowland, you drain all that, So they brought that method, that idea with them from England, and they'd already also done it in northern Germany at this point. It's a real thing. So they're over here doing the same thing. And Bartram, I think, as he had in his DNA, was able to interpret what he was looking at a lot better, even though he hadn't been raised in a tribe and with his people, so to speak. I mean, even his father was a botanist to King George. So I'm thinking the father was the hostage one. Bartram grew up as this is how it works, Yeah. But so anyhow, but that I think gives why, and he also had his father had visited and written a book too, so he could actually kind of see the big change in just the 20 or 30 years of his life. So when he was writing.
And now what's really connecting for me is when we hear stories of during the 1800s or even up to Reconstruction era, when we hear about these maroon indigenous societies in the Dismal Swamp in Florida, we hear that and we think, damn, our ancestors are living with alligators in the swamp. But if you know the lay of the land and you can get into the interior, you find oases and gardens and open land and fields and things of the sort, right?
Right. And guys, I mean, they left remnants up. I believe that's what Callaway Gardens is in Georgia. I believe that's what Cypress Gardens is. And a lot of your so-called, like in South Florida, like these older so-called plantations, the big, I think that was all there. All right. And I think I'm even starting to wonder about like Busch Gardens in Tampa, like what was already there? What are they vaulting? Because gardens were just a huge part of this whole thing. And everywhere he goes, like there's gardens on these, they build the shell mounds in the middle of the lake, and then it just turns into this like plush hanging gardens and with oranges everywhere. And you're like, oh man, yeah, that sounds great. And then he looks over here, guys, this is big time stuff. And he talks about you know, I believe now most of your barrier islands on the Atlantic coast are engineered mounds. He describes on the Florida coast, along the Indian River part of on the Atlantic coast, like 2-mile long orange groves and all this stuff. Like on these, I mean, it's like, what's going on? You know, it's like, this is like wild. This is just like where.
And and furthermore, to really cement for you all how what we think of as wild, uncultivated, swampy marshland, when you actually know the lay of the land and you can breach the interior, you can find all kinds of interesting things. Travis, are you familiar? And I'm sorry, I typically refer to you by your stage name, Handsome History. Is your first name Travis or Tavis? Is there R?
Travis. Yep.
Travis. Okay, perfect. I want to make sure I get your name right, brother. Are you aware of the Mayan step pyramid that was found in Florida?
I see. Not even. No, I am not aware of that.
Hold on. I'm gonna play a short video clip for you, and you do your research. You know about the surveying and the deeds and the hammocks and stuff. Okay. But these indigenous people also clearly had a connection to the Maya, because look at where this pyramid is located. Check this out. Give me just a second to bring this up.
If we can find that step pyramid, I think in a way it would restore their legacy as great nautical masters, as great explorers, and most importantly, it would prove they resettled in America. So the idea is to head directly west, straight line, and try to cover as much as possible.
And guys, to give you some context, this is just a tiny clip of an overall like hour-long video. They already found evidence of a Mayan settlement, because the Mayan, the Olmec, just like our ancestors in the Southeast, they made mounds and structures that aligned with the stars. And if you found one little mound, well, it was going to be this many yards in this degree away from this structure and stuff. So they already found some stuff on the mainland, and they're like, wait a minute, if this is really a Mayan settlement, then at this direction, at this degree, we have to find a pyramid. So they go looking in this area, and guess what? Coincidentally, the land where the step pyramid would be is on government land that you are not allowed to go on. So what do? They use the greatest modern invention for archaeology and research like this. They use LiDAR scanning. If people don't know what LiDAR scanning is, it's a modern invention where you can fly a drone or a plane or a helicopter over an area of land. They've been doing it in the Amazon for the last few years. And back in the day, you would have to deforest an area. You'd have to dig it all up and see what's beneath the jungle canopy, right? But nowadays with LiDAR, the radar penetrates and it reveals what's on the surface, what's even a little subterranean as well, right? And they've been doing this in the Amazon for the last few years. They're finding huge pyramids and mounds identical to the ones in the Southeast, looking just like Cahokia Mound, Poverty Point, right? A huge connection between the tribes of the Southeast, our ancestors, and Central America, South America. But here's evidence to this connection. In Florida, the same place we're talking about these hammock and orange groves and stuff, they find a Mayan step pyramid.
Any anomalies, any human-made structures.
Anything that stands out from the rest of the vegetation. Of course, the main thing we're looking for is a step pyramid. That's our hit.
There's a drone with the LiDAR laser on the bottom.
You can see it's going over now.
Yep.
To start its lawnmower survey pattern. And we're going to work our way from here west over this island.
Equipped with onboard GPS, the LiDAR will map the entire island using a grid search pattern.
And now we are collecting data.
Like the site at Crystal River, any structure we're hoping to find will most likely be covered by hundreds of years of overgrown vegetation.
We're getting more coverage, and we're getting that coverage at different angles, so we get more detail. We're coming in for a landing.
With the grid search complete, it's time to analyze the data.
This baby's our treasure chest. Whatever's in there is going to help us unlock this mystery, man.
Guard that data with your life, my friend. Our journey has confirmed the presence of the Maya throughout Florida, but we have yet to prove that they actually stayed here. The data on this LiDAR mapping system holds the answer to a question that could rewrite history.
We could be standing 200 meters from an ancient Maya settlement. I mean, what we've been looking for this whole time. All right, guys, I got some.
What do you got, pal? What do you got?
Is there any anomalies?
Right there. Wow.
Come on, what do they see on the LiDAR scan? What do you see? You can't see this with the naked eye. You can fly over it, you'll never see it. It's too much dense vegetation, right? It's too thick. But through the laser, what does it reveal?
This one just stood out like nobody's business.
What?
This right here is literally right there.
Right there.
How big is this thing?
Yeah, so it's 73 feet by 62. It's about 13 feet tall. It's rectangular in shape. See that right there? Those are steps, dude.
Look at it. This is unbelievable.
Right.
Jamie, you're
there.
100% sure these are
Yeah,
steps.
absolutely. This was probably some of the better data I've ever seen.
Really?
Dude, can we tell that it's triangular or not?
If it was square and it didn't have steps, it'd just be square, but it has this coming out right here. So the different colors are different elevations.
Wow. Unbelievable.
See where it's coming up in terms of like a pyramid this way
Yeah.
and diagonally right here and here?
So you're saying there's a ramp going up?
Yes,
Terraced, like a step pyramid, and then has a flat top.
correct.
Dude, I think this is our pyramid.
Come on, y'all. You would think this would make the news, right? You would think this would
Wow.
at least circulate somewhere. Hey, guys, Mayan step pyramid found through laser LiDAR technology in Florida. But crickets, silence.
Did you see my video? They mentioned Crystal River, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just did a field visit there this Monday. I got a ton of video. I did a quick release. I codenamed it Othello, but it is my uninformed opinion that was an ancient, gigantic mound complex, and I can show like where the terraces are. I can show how it all went down to the Gulf Coast into the river. I can show this area called Ozello, which is an Indian name, is full of burial mounds.
And you said you just dropped a video on this on Monday?
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of
Let's
videos.
see.
Got to put it together because I was just trying to figure out how to present it, because I'm like, I can tell you because it follows, and everything follows the theory of how they hide things. They have an airfield there in Little Old Crystal River, and it's just perfectly located by the coast. And then I started it just, and you can imagine, you can see it even now, the artificial perfectly rising inclines, and then it goes up, and then you start to realize what you're really looking at. And then there's mounds everywhere in this county. The houses have mounds in their backyard, man. It's like right there in people's faces. It's like,
Hides in plain sight. I mean, if nobody teaches you about it, you just think it's a hill. It's just a cool little landscaping feature. No.
That out, but that's what those guys, I think, are saying in that area.
Yep.
That's where they're seeing under
Evidence of a Maya settlement. Yep.
Well, I think that's legit, man. I mean, I think it's going to be wild. Like, it's crazy. Like, Cahokia level stuff, like big, like a real.
And they've been finding Cahokia level stuff all through the Amazon rainforest too. Over the last 4 or 5 years, they first started LiDAR scanning. They're finding evidence of huge cities, huge pyramids, huge settlements, and the architecture is identical to southeastern indigenous architecture.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a LiDAR drone because once I can.
No, the time I've already looked into it. Guys, y'all do not see me doing like these content creators running a bunch of GoFundMe campaigns and stuff. But when it comes time to get that LiDAR, your boy's running a GoFundMe. I looked it up. It's at least $60,000 minimum.
Well, I mean, I don't even need one to spot. It's like wild, man. I mean, they leave up these hammocks and they've cleared everything else, and that's like you got to go look, and then you go look and you look in there. Oh,
wherever they didn't deforest the area and parcel it, they're hiding something.
I'll be releasing that out, guys. But I'm telling you, man, this stuff is real.
Yeah. Oh, and guys, we're trying to get a Handsome History to 1,000 subscribers over the weekend. So if you're not subscribed to Handsome History on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. Don't just subscribe, but hit the bell notification. Select all. Do the same thing when you guys subscribe to me. That's why some of you guys say, hey, I'm subscribed, Mike, but I don't get the notifications. Well, it's not enough to subscribe nowadays. You also have to hit all on the bell notification icon. But yeah, let's keep this flowing. So again, when you were giving your presentation, another thing that really hit me was this whole notion that the Spaniards brought new things here that weren't here before. They did it with the oranges. They also do it with horses. I think there's a couple other things as well. And it's like, y'all really giving the Spaniards a lot of credit. And it's so bad nowadays that even if you were to go on Google, right? If we just go on Google and type in, how did oranges come to America? They're going to give you a bullshit AI overview that says oranges came to America with the Spanish, who brought them with Christopher Columbus's second voyage in 1493 and planted seeds in Hispaniola. Okay, so how did those seeds in Hispaniola get to the Florida in the most remote parts of? I mean, this makes no sense. Come on.
Right. So I deep dive on this. I'll summarize it. So the first thing to say is, like, even the Spaniards themselves say they saw oranges here. They also say they saw horses, and they call the horses wild, and they also call the oranges wild. The second thing is that just a real quick one is just that this specific orange blossom scent that they record and talk about is the scent only found in the indigenous in American oranges, and the oranges in the Southeast is not a scent replicator that they came and the same smell as in Iberia in Spain. And the third thing is just none of the Spanish missionaries and all those early reports talk about how they invested and built up a orange grove plantation, and then they decided to show the Indians how to do it a little differently. And then by the time you get to 1760, these Indians are so smart at learning new things from the Spaniards that orange groves, like you get my drift. Like
in less than a century, the Indians master orange groves thanks to the Spanish. In less than a century, Indians master riding horses thanks to the Spanish. I mean, come on.
So at least they imply a serious ability to learn things quickly. So you guys should take that as a compliment, I guess. So those two issues though parallel each other. And you get the same knee-jerk reaction from people too on both of them. It's really interesting to me how people get emotional about oranges and horses, but they do. And there's some real obvious questions that sort of break down those two.
And you know what? We're a little pressed for time, guys. When this broadcast ends, don't go anywhere. It's going to automatically push you into the next broadcast. We have a couple more presentations this evening. But another thing that came to mind as you were doing your presentation is this agriculture in the marshes and the swampland, on the lakes and the canals. This seems very similar to hydroponics, right? I mean, I'm from California, born and raised. I grew marijuana in Humboldt County. I know some of the best way to grow some weed is a hydroponic system. And in that same vein, it seems like our ancestors were expert agriculturalists that relied heavily on hydroponics because of the Mississippian river system and how there was always marshland and rivers to access, right?
Yeah. So they were always using the rivers, and I believe canaling tributaries and streams in the bigger rivers, and then connecting them. That's why you have a lot of seven rivers. Which is these seven rivers all around the world that always work out. Yeah, I mean, at some point, I think there's a lot of that going on, and then of course it feeds into transporting the goods you're producing, right? So doesn't it make a lot of sense? Like you're in the middle of the Okefenokee swamp and you catch whatever fish, whatever beaver, and it's already wet, and you just load it onto this easily moving thing that has a lot less friction called a canoe in water, right? And you push that along. So, and you
guys, imagine it's like
you have to imagine a conveyor belt.
We literally have a agricultural hub of abundance on a natural highway continental interstate system. I mean, even in my research of the early days of colonialism, they talk about seeing Indians with these big cargo type canoes, and they're transporting goods. And clearly these Indians came from the Caribbean, they came from South, and there's these huge trade networks. And now we see how they took that and bastardized it to where we now have like a modern concrete highway system with smog and pollution and roadside accidents and all kinds of shit. Like, just look how they totally turned it upside down, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of opposition. And I'll just say this. So the definition of the civilization, when they were using it and calling Indian savages and uncivilized, the definition of being civilized was truly clearing the land, it being on dry land, and things being fenced and properly surveyed, and then having the paper title. And that surveying ritual that the Masons are famous for, that's a very serious ritual. And at the end of it, paper title was created, and you were in this new system And they take that and apply that, and they look at the Indians doing things that are in the wetlands, and they're not using fences, and they let the horses, their brands, right? You guys were smart. You branded the horses and let them move around common land rather than the way it works now, right? You see, the Spanish saw that and they call those wild horses because they're not enclosed. So what you see, the mentality, you see the clash of civilizations.
I mean, is this not a tale as old as time? If they can't monetize it, control it.
Control is really the thing.
I mean, it's really all about control. Think about prohibition. Prohibition wasn't about alcohol as bad. It was about they couldn't tax this underground free market. I mean, think about marijuana, right? Marijuana was illegal until they figured out how to tax it and regulate it, right?
Under their control, to make money.
And actually, real quick, we're going to segue into the next live stream in just a moment. But another thing to really drive home what I've been trying to educate people about is that we're not just indigenous to the Southeast. Our ancestors, some of them migrated from Central America, from South America, from the Caribbean. The entire continent of the Americas is our home. And in that same vein, when we talk about this hydroponic system in the Southeast in Florida, right, this reminds me of the Mesoamerican indigenous agriculture practice of chinampas. Have you heard of chinampas?
Are those like the hanging gardens?
Oh yeah, hanging gardens, but more specifically, they're along the rivers, they're man-made islands and stuff. Check this out.
Yes.
Check this out. Chinampas.
I've come now to the most beautiful place, a very far cry from the noise and bustle of Mexico City. The mist is coming off the water and the farmers are working the fields. It's beautiful. This is Xochimilco. Not far from the heart of the modern city, this working landscape is an insight into Mexico City's watery past. Early settlers built this ingenious system, artificial islands known as chinampas, on which to grow their crops. Lucio Usubiaga works with the farmers here to try and preserve the islands and their way of life. This used to extend right across the valley that Mexico City now sits in. Are we looking at the last remnants of these islands?
Yeah, we are. In Mexico City, you know, it's a basin, so it had 5 lakes, and right now, this is the last.
Remember when they went to Mexico City, when they went to Central America, the Spaniards, they said the Inca, the different indigenous communities they encountered, they had what appeared to be floating cities, even cleaner than Venice. They had huge capitals on a lake with these canals and stuff. I mean, but what do? Handsome history. Didn't Mexico City get dredged and drained? And I mean, come on.
Yeah, you're right. So it's also interesting to me that they'll admit it in Mexico that they had these type of gardens, but you're not going to get the same admittance about what I've been reading and finding out in America. You know, it's very interesting, but yeah, they can. They got to dry. Everything gets dried, guys. It's very, very intriguing.
Same thing with California. I'm from California. There's a reason why the Spaniards depicted California as an island, because without the thousands of dams that we now have, man-made dams, there would be what appears to be an inland sea from Baja California all the way up to San Francisco. But what did they do? They dredged it, they drained it, started pumping water to LA for settlers and stuff. I mean, It's a tale as old as time.
Right. In LA, they literally built that pipe to suck it dry. They finished that, I believe, they finished that pipe like in 1907 or something. Yeah, so it's still going on in as late as 1907.
Yeah, no, it gets deep. But guys, when you start to research indigenous communities across the Americas, you see a lot of cultural similarities. The only thing you don't see similarities with is with Bering Strait migrants, with those folks in the high desert and in the plains region. They have a different culture, they have a different custom, that they're the more nomadic, roaming with the buffalo, scalping people, etc., etc. That's why we see that depicted in media, because it was kind of sensationalized, because the last phase of westward expansion was finally going through the plains. and those folks got contacted last, but they did put up a fierce resistance, right? When those settlers were getting in their covered wagon, trying to go to the Oregon Trail and whatnot. But when we talk about our community, our indigenous ancestors, we have spiritual systems that mirror spiritual systems of indigenous Mesoamericans and South Americans. We have agricultural practices, architecture. There's so much cultural diffusion. But I digress. Handsome History, go ahead and give us some closing remarks. Then we're going to segue into the next broadcast. The next broadcast, we're going to be talking about how New York was stolen from the indigenous Black Americans that were originally there. But go ahead and leave us with some closing remarks.
Wait, too. Okay, but I'll sum this one up. Yeah, just have fun understanding that when you see these clumps, you might be looking at residual hammocks, or you see these little islands out, especially around the Gulf and off of Florida. There's a lot of that. Do a little research in your local county history or something. You might be surprised what they might turn up, and there might have been finds before, and you can start to maybe see something right there in your own county. You'd be surprised, how much of it's really still there.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, guys, for those who are watching live with us, don't go anywhere. When this broadcast ends, there's going to be a 5 to 10 second countdown on the screen, and YouTube's automatically going to redirect you into the next broadcast. We'll see you in just a moment.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British men. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them. And this shit get way deeper than your pigment.